Welcome to the Cutting the Gordian Knot podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the biggest, at least the most pervasive, and largest scale economic sin, problem, whatever you want to call it, that I know of. And that's government redistribution. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and he was bringing up things like, is it always moral to invest in the stock market? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Well, what about usury? I'm like, yeah, don't listen to the usury boys. Go and see previous episodes on that kind of stuff. And he's like, well, it sounds like you just don't think there are any big economic sins going on right now. I'm like, well, actually I do. I can name a huge one. Government redistribution is something you don't really hear from the pulpit. It's something bishops and the popes don't typically address. But I do think it's a grave sin right now in pretty much every modern economy. And it needs to be stopped. And I'm going to tell you exactly why, with, like 5 or 6 reasons which I've assembled. The first one is pretty short. Pretty simple. It breaks subsidiarity. Subsidiarity, if you're a Catholic listener, is something you have to believe. It's part of the faith. And let me just read from Quadraricio Anno what it says about this. Just as it is gravely wrong to take from individuals what they can accomplish by their own initiative and industry and give it to the community, so also it's an injustice and at the same time a grave evil. What kind of evil? A grave evil, guys. And a disturbance of right order to assign to a greater and higher association what lesser and subordinate organizations can do. For every social activity ought of its very nature to furnish help to the members of the body social and never destroy and absorb them. So let me ask, could helping the poor be done on any level lower than, the federal government? Yeah. I mean, it could be done in the state government, and it already is. It could be done with the local government, and it already is, in large part. Could it be done by your church? Yeah. Could it be done by a friend, a family member, a coworker, a boss? Could it be done by somebody in the community, a charitable organization? Yeah. Any of those could help the poor, ought to help the poor, and probably do help the poor right now. And yet, we see that a higher association has basically steamrolled this with massive government redistribution programs. So that's a violation of subsidiarity. We could stop right here. It's wrong because of that. And this is just part of our faith. Next, though, we're going to make it a little bit more nuanced, but I want you to feel the power of that kind of objection. And heck, all of these. The next reason it's wrong is it's just wrong to steal from the rich and give to the poor. Even if you're a government, and even if you feel like you have a good reason, and even if you feel like the rich have a lot of extra stuff, it's still wrong, and therefore you shouldn't do it. Now, that doesn't mean that all taxation is theft, but it does mean that a lot of it can be theft. And just because you're organized like a government doesn't mean that your wealth extraction activities just gets a pass being called taxation. It doesn't. It can absolutely still be theft, even if you've organized yourself into what looks like a government. You've actually undercut your own legitimacy if you're not operating for the common good. I want to read you something. It is by a pirate. That's right, a pirate. As reported by St. Augustine, this is a pirate who's talking to Alexander the Great. And it's recorded in the City of God book 7-ish or something. Justice being taken away then. What are kingdoms but great robberies? For what are robberies themselves but little kingdoms? The band itself is made up of men. It is ruled by the authority of a prince. It is knit together by the pact of confederacy. The booty is divided by the law agreed upon. If, by the admittance of abandoned men, this evil increases to such a degree that it holds places, fixes abodes, takes possession of cities, and subdues people, it assumes the more plain name of a kingdom, because the reality is now manifestly conferred on it, not by the removal of covetousness, but by the addition of impunity. Indeed, that was an apt and true reply that was given to Alexander the Great by a pirate who had been seized. For when that king had asked the man what he meant by keeping hostile possession of the sea, he answered with bold pride, "What thou meanest by seizing the whole earth. But because I do it with a petty ship, I'm called a robber, whilst you, who do it with a great fleet, are styled an emperor." So if a government is just a tool for taking from some, just getting stuff, and then passing it out, even if according to their agreed upon little laws and schemed, to the people that they would like to pass it out to, then it's no different than a big band of robbers. It doesn't matter that they have buildings and that they control territory. It's just a band of robbers. So this is not, in this case, a government that administers justice, justice being a common good, the ultimate common good for the society, and the prerequisite for all other types of common good. It's the prerequisite for these hashtag Plato. You can check him for the details on that one. But we're not just meant to say, yeah, it's okay to divide the spoils of theft amongst political favored groups. Though more on justice later. So you might be thinking, okay, I don't know, you're kind of moralizing here at me about it. You're taking from this group, giving to the others. But doesn't it help the poor? Well, first off, this definitely needs a companion episode, which really takes the more economic angle. Let me just give you one fact you may not have heard, though I've certainly said it on previous podcasts. The amount that the government currently transfers to the bottom 20% of earners in the form of benefits and cash is more than the middle 20% of earners earn in income. So, did it work? How effective do you think that is? Because that's an unreal amount of money that's being transferred, and I don't think it has that many tangible benefits. In fact, in large part, I think it hurts people, a lot of people. We'll have to get that in a later episode. So, in another section, we have St. Augustine in his book Against Lying say the following, and this is a rhetorical question: who is there that would say that we have to give to the poor, so let us commit thefts upon the rich? The answer is nobody would say that, because that would be wrong. He goes on, but if justice deservedly punishes a thief, albeit he shall say and show that he had withdrew superfluities from the rich, that he might afford necessities to a poor man. So here he says, okay, we justly punish a thief if he takes from a rich person who had excess and gives it to somebody who has need. That's still theft, guys. Sorry. Some man will say, so then any thief whatsoever is to be accounted equal with that thief who steals with a will of mercy? Who would say this? But of these two, it does not follow that any is good, because one is worse. He is worse who steals through coveting than he who steals through pity. But if all theft be sin, from all theft we must abstain. So even if you are driven by pity, even if you think you're just taking the extras that the rich don't need, St. Augustine's here to say, sorry, bucko. you don't get me wrong. You're better than the guy who's coveting stuff and stealing for his own enrichment. You know, that's great, but theft is still a sin, homies. And from sin, we must abstain. Now, you might be thinking, but aren't there some situations where we can steal, right? Like in terrible times. Well, yes, there are, guys. And Aquinas further specifies what the tradition is telling us. He says in his section on, robbery. Nevertheless, if the need be so manifest and urgent that it is evident that the present need be remedied by whatever means be at hand, for instance, when a person is in some imminent danger and there is no other possible remedy. How many possible remedies? No other possible remedy. Then it is lawful for a man to succor his own need by means of another's property, by taking it either openly or secretly, which is interesting, theft or robbery. Nor is this, properly speaking, theft or robbery. So he says it's not really theft in this case. You're not guilty of the sin because we should always from sin abstain. But this is a point where that taking of the property is no longer theft or robbery because it meets these conditions. So we have to ask, are we okay to take people's stuff and redistribute it under this provision? Can we skip the whole, oh, it's theft or robbery because of what Aquinas has just told us? Well, maybe in a few very, very specific cases we could, but let's just remind ourselves of them. Is it a dire need? It's not just, well, I'm not as rich as other people. No. It's imminent danger. It's some type of like actual need, right? And then really the big one is there's no other possible remedy, right? That's an interesting one. So if you say, other people have remedied their position by, having a job, well, then there certainly is a possible remedy. Now, if you are not capable of working, well, that remedy's off the table, right? Or if you have, people who could provide for you, you could get a roommate and then afford your bills. Well, there's a possible remedy. Other people have done it, but maybe all of this isn't possible. Then only in the places where we actually meet this definition can we use this as an exception to take people. And then it's no longer theft or robbery. But be real, guys. How much of the time is our massive federal redistribution programs actually fulfilling these conditions? I would say almost none. Now, I can already hear the screaming. That's right. You can hear me. I can hear you. I can hear your minds, guys. You're saying, yeah. But get to the part about like the universal destination of goods. And, didn't some pope say that all wealth comes with a, quote, social mortgage? Well, here's the thing, guys. Yeah, all that stuff. But I think that this is a private and moral call to the conscience of free people, and it is not to be construed. And I don't see any place in the tradition that is construed as a legal mandate or a legal claim on one's property that ought to be extracted through the force of the state and the apparatus of a giant federal redistribution program. So we could just grant like a pretty wild version of destination of goods and a pretty bold view of what the, quote, social mortgage is on wealth. And I would still feel most comfortable saying, well, that's a private moral call that, yeah, respond to. That's great. I'm very much in favor of charity. But you'd have to prove something very, very, very different than the reality of these factors. You'd have to prove that this justifies some type of legal right that's enforced by the state. Let me give an example of why I don't think this quite fits the bill. Man and woman are made for one another. So we're directed towards one another through nature and also through divine command. Go forth and multiply. Yet it would be super, super evil to say, well, listen, like the destination of man is to woman and woman to man, and like we're made to do this, and therefore we ought to have like a large government program that uses like legal methods and the force of law and the threat of punishment in order for me to be able to get that special over there, right? That's certainly not okay. Instead, we would say we acknowledge all of these things. Directed by nature, we're directed by divine command to make this type of self-gift to another person. 100% agree. And people need to freely choose to do that. And this is not meant to be the sphere of a giant, overarching, subsidiary, crushing, incredibly inefficient state. Okay. Just to put a pin here, not all taxation is theft, but it would be theft if you are depriving people contrary to justice of what they have, and you are giving to people contrary to justice, which brings us to justice. So I think that reason 3 is our current redistribution system is a violation of justice. Now, one of our favorite theme verses for this podcast comes from Leviticus 19. It says, "Do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. So we care about justice. We care about what is right. We're not meant to warp justice because, oh, you're poor, let's warp justice. Oh, you're rich, let's warp justice. No, we care about justice. That's what keeps the whole state. This is what keeps the wheels on in any society, is justice. So, I hope I don't need to remind you, don't be a justice pervert. In fact, don't be any type of pervert. Now, inside of justice, there are two different types we're going to be talking about. One is commutative justice, and the other is distributive justice. So commutative justice would be like man to man. This would govern things like exchanges. You go and buy a hamburger. Now you give them, what is it at Five Guys, $1,000, and then they give you a hamburger. And that's commutative justice, right? You paid them, you both freely, fairly contracted in order to exchange things. That's wonderful. And that's commutative justice. Distributive justice is not just person to person, these exchanges, it's actually regarding like man to society. So this is a recognition of the unequal nature of people, and it's the distributing of things like honor, power, or common resources appropriately according to the inequality of people. So those are the two different types of justice we have going on. To give a few examples, an example of commutative justice would be you're hired as a CEO and you start working there. You're exchanging your labor for their money, and you both believe that you're going to value or to generate great value from this. Distributive justice would be you're given the honor and power of being the governor of a state. Maybe you're elected, appointed, whatever it is. And now you not only have these honors and powers, heck, you also have the use of the governor's mansion. So this would be distributive justice. So you have a role to play vis-a-vis society, and then society is paying you something in return. Then we have, let's say, just earning wages. That's commutative justice. It's man to man. But we could also have, and this is an interesting one, I'm going to put a pin in this one. Distributive justice could be we could have an example of a hungry orphan asking for food. So he merits food because of his dignity as a human being, being made in the image of God. Now, this is a Catholic distinctive. Like from what I can tell from Aristotle, he'd say, no, it's not distributive justice. Distributive justice is man to society with respect to merit. And, it's not merit. Like somebody earning an elected position because they are virtuous and they're raised to this, and now they're getting the honor because of their virtue in this civil society. Okay, that's distributive justice. Orphan did? You're just giving him food? I don't know about that one. No, it's respect to merit. It's respect to things like that instead. But the Catholic distinctive here, I think, is we just say anybody made in the image of God merits love. All right? Just because of what they are. So I think that orphan, that hungry orphan, I chose hungry orphan for a reason. Actually, distributive justice would say we ought to give him something. Now, we shouldn't break subsidiarity. We shouldn't steal from people in order to do it, right? But we ought to get this to him. Mm-hmm. Totally. And if we're in one of those cases where it's an urgent need and we just have to get him, yeah, swipe some bread and give it to the orphan if there's no other way to do it. Final one, commutative justice could be a banker who makes a ton of money being a banker. And that's great. Mm-hmm. He's banking, people are paying it. The whole thing goes round and round. Distributive justice could be an amazing school teacher is beloved and cherished by a community. That's just, right? There's a type of justice that she is paid honor for what she's done for society, right? And it doesn't have to be like a monetary exchange or anything, but there's a justice because she's an amazing school teacher. She's unequal. She's better than the other school teachers. Therefore, there ought to be some honor that's paid to that virtue. And that's good. When we do that person to society, that's distributive justice. All right. So I think it's wrong to be a pervert. Don't be a pervert, guys. Don't be a commutative justice pervert, and let's not be distributive justice perverts. So a commutative justice pervert would be one who, say, withholds the wages of a workman. This is a sin, one of the 4 sins, I believe, that cries out to heaven for vengeance. Very serious. I believe 2 of the 4 are economic sins, by the way. So to distort the market so that things don't exchange for their proper amounts. And we screw this up all the time through taxes, transfers, regulations, quotas, tariffs, all sorts of things like this. When we distort these prices, when we distort these exchanges, we are messing with commutative justice, and we're being commutative justice perverts. So don't be a pervert, guys. So that's one way that that can go wrong. How can distributive justice go wrong? Well, here's how. If you give to those who do not merit, well, that would be perverting it, because it's virtuous when you do give to those who merit. Now, I made the claim that the orphan can claim a right to food on the basis of their human dignity. So he merits that food in the image of God. We ought to do it at the lowest level, right? In the absence of any law, we still ought to respond to this. And you can certainly call this instance commutative or distributive justice. But no, A, it's a need. They can't supply it for themselves. And we're not even going to have a B. Let's just talk about this one right here. This basic right, in light of human dignity, for something as basic as food, evaporates as soon as you are willing but unable to provide for yourself. Here's what Scripture says. 2 Thessalonians 3:10 reads, "If anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat." So, often shortened to, "He who shall not work shall not eat." So you no longer get this right to just be fed if you are unwilling. Case of the orphan, he's unable. Case of this dude, he's just being lazy. So at very least, when we think about things like giant government redistribution programs, we ought to make sure that we have a precondition of work so that people work to the best of their ability. Otherwise, well, they're certainly not being meritorious here. And I mean, he who shall not work shall not eat, guys. It would be wrong to reward people when they're being vicious by being lazy in this case. That's a perversion of distributive justice. So any system that rewards vice is contrary to distributive justice. So if you get public benefits because you are lazy and you're being foolish, and we're enabling this, we're luring people to vice, we're promoting a type of lifestyle which is not virtuous, oh, that's sinful. And we're doing it with the public coffers, we're being distributive justice perverts here. We shouldn't be perverts. Yeah, distributive justice ought to only reward virtue and merit. And then we offer people the necessities of life that befit their human dignity. And then we as individuals, we ought to rise above this basic call and respond to a call of generosity. That's what we ought to do. But at the federal level, I'm not convinced they should do anything because that breaks subsidiarity. At some level of government, I could be persuaded that we should respond to the people who are not unwilling, but are simply unable, and they don't have another resort. Maybe that's something we could fill in, but that does not describe our current system. Not by a long shot. Instead, what describes our current system is perverting distributive justice, because we're actually incentivizing vice instead of virtue. We need to completely redesign this stuff. And maybe that can be in another economic episode where we deal with this. Next one. Reason 4. Inequality is good, not bad. Here's what Rerum Novarum says. It must be first of all recognized that the condition of things inherent in human affairs must be borne with, for it is impossible to reduce civil society to one dead level. Socialists may in that intend to do their utmost, but all striving against nature is in vain. There naturally exist amongst mankind manifold differences of the most important kind. People differ in capacity, skill, health, strength, and unequal fortune is a necessary result of unequal condition. Such inequality is far from being disadvantageous either to individuals or to the community. So let me just ask you that. If you missed that last line, do you think it hurts individuals, or do you think it hurts society, the community as a whole, to have inequality? Rerum Novarum says such inequality, says inequality, is far, far from being disadvantageous either to individuals or to the community. This is, hey guys, everybody's all about Catholic social teaching, or at least people who comment on this in the Catholic sphere. And I think they misrepresent it horribly quite often. That's what it says. Inequality is not bad. It's far from being disadvantageous. And also, it affirms that we can have all sorts of different reasons why we're unequal. And we're not saying we have to bring us to dead level. In fact, that's what the socialists want. The church condemns socialism. So that's reason number 4. It's just not a goal we ought to have, to bring people to a dead level, or to take from some people to give to another people, to kind of flatten it out and to get rid of the natural inequality that arises from different skills and different virtue and different life circumstances. Those are natural, those are good, and we shouldn't strive against them. Instead, they ought to be born with. So who's saying that, guys? Not too many people, but this is part of our tradition. This is the text. I just read it to you, folks. Reason number 5. We have what Rerum Novarum describes as an inviolable right to private property that helps the masses. Here's what it says. This one's short. It comes from paragraph 15, if you're reading along. The first and most fundamental principle, therefore, if one would undertake to alleviate the condition of the masses, must be the inviolability of private property. Who had that one in their bingo card, guys? And I think this is absolutely true. I mean, over, I think it's a 20, 30 year period. I'm going to get these numbers wrong. 20 or 30 year period, we as like a world spent something like $3 or $4 trillion in aid to Africa. And we barely affected economic growth. We barely affected their rise through that type of charity. Meanwhile, we had China think, you know what? Maybe capitalism's not that bad. We had the one guy say, I don't care what color the cat is, I just care that it catches mice. Meaning, I don't care if it's capitalism, I just want to have rapid economic growth. And they in large part copied groups like Singapore, Hong Kong, and by extension, British common law, governing a lot of economic exchanges through their program of special economic zones, which meant they grew incredibly. They're over a global middle class now, and they sent out a massive amount of things into the world, manufacturing them as they raised their material condition, as they did things like drove down mortgage interest rates in the US for like, I don't know, a decade or two by purchasing a bunch of bonds. I mean, they were actually, in this respect, not all certainly, but in this respect, they're kind of a huge gift to the world, producing things, trading with people, participating in communicative justice, great stuff. And they got a lot wealthier. It helped that massive people. It helped 1 billion people rise from poverty. Incredible. And what happened? What was the first and foremost principle here? Well, private property, guys, the very basis of the free market. Now it says inviolable. And I think that we should just go, we can't violate it. And we see what happened with, say, Aquinas and St. Augustine there. St. Augustine says, you just can't steal, folks. And Aquinas says, in this select case, it's not theft or robbery. So I don't think we have to violate something which drops straight out of one of the commandments, thou shalt not steal, which absolutely affirms private property. We don't have to say we're violating it. We're not. That'd be wrong to violate it. Instead, we can say there's certain times where private property simply doesn't apply, like in the case that Aquinas put out. I think that's probably the best way to make sense of this. But there you go, guys. That's my 5th reason private property rocks. And it actually helps people to affirm this and to have a free functioning market that raises people out of poverty very promptly. Let me just ask you this. If you're listening, you're probably one of the people in those first 3 income quintiles. So the first 60% of earners. Yeah, you and somebody in poverty, you all get the same amount after taxes, transfers, cash payments, benefits, on average, everybody in the first 60% is almost the exact same amount that you get. Oh, cool. You make more in wages? Yeah, but you're paying a ton in private insurance and you're off Medicaid, aren't you? Oh, yeah, cool. You got a raise at work. You got a bonus. Yeah, good for you. But you actually don't get rental assistance for your housing, nor do you get any type of SNAP benefits or child care credits for. I mean, it all pretty much nets out for the first 60%. So how on earth does that incentivize people to go forward? It's going to make you feel trapped. Why? Because we violated that natural gradation of wealth and we tried to stamp everybody to dead level. And guess what? We did it in the first 60%, and that's not cool. Number 6. I just don't think that these massive federal, large-scale, ham-handed redistribution programs, which do in fact steal from people because it's not justice, it's not fair, and give to other people in a way which often just promotes vice, I don't think that they hit the root cause of people in poverty and people in need. I think commonly, not always, but commonly, it's just a virtue problem. I mean, that's my experience. I used to be a landlord for a while, so I get a very granular look into a lot of poor people's finances. I found, yeah, it's typically a virtue problem, folks. I saw people who made just about the same amount of money. Some struggle month after month. Others do awesome, save, be prudent, and live a happy life. I saw both of this all with the same income. I've seen workers that have worked with me in the construction trades and in restaurants. Some do great with the same amount of money. Some do terribly. And it's about the virtue and the wisdom with which they conduct their finances. There was a story from the CEO of Cross Catholic about how they're building a bunch of homes in the Philippines. And there's a spin-off organization from Cross Catholic because their idea was that you would build this new home, then you would begin to invite these people into the community. They would learn about virtue. They would learn about Christ. They participate in the church, all this great stuff going on. You'd build them up in virtue so that they were capable of taking on this great gift of a house that you're giving them. And they would only build houses as fast as they could develop these communities. And the result was thriving communities. But the spin-off organization said, no, it's not a virtue thing. You condescending, awful people. How dare you? No, it's an economic thing. Let's just build them a house. The problem with poor people is they don't have money. That's the problem, obviously. So they built more houses. They built many more houses, much quicker than Cross Catholic did. And in a few years, they were all practically destroyed. Crime, they looked like slums. They were torn apart. It was awful. The communities were dead and dangerous. It was a virtue problem, guys. So that's what I think is going on. And when we just pass people out a check, we've done nothing for virtue. When we honor subsidiarity and real people enter into the lives of real people and we help them, that matters. Also, when a check comes from a federal program, it doesn't feel like anybody made a sacrifice. Somebody did. They were robbed. But when you know the person and you say, hey, I'm going to give this to you, or maybe you give to a great organization that's a good faith-based, responsible organization that gives on your behalf, which is great, like Cross Catholic, shout out to them, then they enter into these communities. They cultivate virtue. They make these people capable of receiving this gift and flourishing thereby. That's awesome. That really changes lives. That type of human connection is absent a giant ham-handed federal program. And that's why I don't think it works. And to back me up a little bit more, here's what Scripture says. This is all from Proverbs, of course. If you plan and work hard, you will have plenty. If you hurry to get rich, you'll end up poor. All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk only leads to poverty. The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied. So, yeah, it's a virtue problem. We're not addressing it, so we need to address that instead. Otherwise, we're wasting our money and often funding vice. The next thing is, there's other big root causes of why, if you're listening, you might think, okay, dude, are you throwing shade on me? Because I'm legitimately struggling. I have kids, maybe I'm a young family, and you're, busting on me and saying things, violating script. Come on, I'm trying to be wise here. Well, everybody forgets that stuff's expensive. And people struck that off. Oh, stuff's expensive. Anyways, I need higher wages. I need no. If we stop being community justice perverts, we can make the cost of things fall dramatically. If you remember, months back, I had an economist on, is it Brian Kaplan? Might have been. Anyways, really popular episode, really cool guy. And we talked about like housing economics and stuff like that. And we both came to the conclusion that if we had our druthers, our independent estimates were that we could cut the cost of new housing in half, actually all housing, in half. Totally possible. The episode, I think a week or two prior, that's the claim I made. I went through a number of numbers for you, and that's what he comes to. And I think that's the sensible amount. That's a really good estimate. So we can get rid of a bunch of really bad laws which screw up communitative justice, and we can lower the cost of housing dramatically. And I trust me, if we reverence the fact that we're given the right to private property, and it's actually like enshrined in the 10 Commandments, and we function from that with a free and fair market in which we respect communitative justice, oh, guys, you're going to see the cost of things plummet and productivity surge. And yeah, it's going to be a lot harder to be poor if we do that, guys. And that's kind of what Rerum Novarum said is, if we want to help the masses, let's begin with private property. I think that's true. So there you go, guys. That's it. I don't know. One last thing is, we do have in the tradition stuff like structures of sin. There's bad stuff going on, but this is kind of what I'm talking about. It's not the root cause. Let's get rid of those things, whatever they are. I'm sure I can name them, but let's run through real quick. Biggest economic sin. I'm pretty sure this probably is the largest scale one. Government redistribution. Break subsidiarity. And I think we had a quote which nails that. And it's a part of our faith. I mean, that's a big one. Next, just taking from one group just to give to another, that kind of exchange, that can fall afoul of it just being theft. Not all taxation is theft, but this sure looks like it. And you can't just justify it because you think it has good effects. Augustine says, sorry, if it's theft, it's a sin. And sin we need to avoid. We looked at when Thomas Aquinas gave us some exceptions, but when we looked at them closely, we see it's for things like imminent danger and when there's no other option. Then kind of the big point is when we talked about justice and that there's commutative and distributive, man to man in exchanges, then man to society at large, respecting the unequal nature of people and the merits thereof, and the assigning of things like honor or power, public resources, public stuff to them. And I think we found that we're actually violating both types. I think a very naive view is to hear distributive justice and think, oh, so we need to distribute it more evenly. No, because we also saw in what Rerum Novarum that we're not meant to do that. That was point 4, that we're not chasing some type of dead level equality. Instead, we actually accept, bear with, and believe that it's not at all disadvantageous to have that gradation of inequality. Because if it's coming from something like health, strength, skill, capacity, and whatnot, then it's not a problem. And yeah, free markets, they're great. They'll do a better job. Can you imagine what you would do if maybe one of the people who are paying for all of this, what if you had an extra $40,000 every year? I mean, if you're serious about wanting to help the poor and you'd be like, oh no, the redistribution system ended and the poor people aren't being cared for, but you also have an extra $40,000 a year, what would you do with it? I'd be so excited to see what we would do with it. If we ended all those programs and we let people have it, I'd be very excited about what happens with private charity. Because here's what I'm going to guess. We're going to get much smarter uses of money. I think we're going to get more things like partnerships and loans and helping people start businesses. For instance, I have a friend who's looking to get investment in doing a food trailer, making Mexican food, because he's a Mexican dude and he needs some money for that. I'd love to partner with him for something like that. He's going to have a job which pays more. He's going to be able to rope in some people like the wives of some of his friends who can only work part-time because they're caring for kids. They're going to be better off. This community is going to be better off. Everybody's going to be better off. And that would be money that, hey, could just be an investment and could be used again to help somebody else. Like, this is the kind of stuff that, hey, if we don't have to pay 30, 40, 50, $100,000 tax bills, I mean, that's a lot more opportunity to do that. So I'd be excited to see, what's been crowded out. There's one economist that I heard, whose name escapes me, who did some work showing how, as we brought in a lot of these government programs, we almost dollar for dollar crowded out private charity. And that's horrible, because we lose that personal connection, that sacrifice, that drawing people into community, that inculcation of virtue as a result of seeing that, hey, I'm making a sacrifice because I actually care about you. A big problem, guys. I hope we hear more about this from the pulpit. I hear you. I really hope that, like, the usury boys go and stop worrying about silly things, and listen to my guy Matthew Advent and read his paper. Stop worrying about that and focus on real, actual problems that we have in economic life. And this is a really big one. I mean, we're taking the wages of a lot of workers in order to fund this, and that's a sin that cries out to heaven for vengeance. Really, really, really serious stuff, guys. Why, seriously, thank you for listening, and I want to invite you to share it with a friend. Maybe somebody who really wants to redistribute things, and maybe at some point I'll make an economic version of this episode. We'll go through some of the numbers and the data on what does it actually do economically, and what we might have as a result if we ended it and replaced it with private charity, investment, etc. All right. Thanks for listening.